The wind was not wind anymore. It was a voice, a long, hollow whisper that carried across the ruins of a world gasping its final breaths. The planet of Virella had once been a garden. Blue skies, green valleys and rivers that shimmered like molten glass beneath its twin suns. Now the sky was a smear of ash and dying light, and the air reeked of rust and electricity. Elias Ward lay on the cracked soil, his visor fractured, his suit screaming warnings in red. The others were gone. The ship Aurora's Promise had lifted 3 hours ago, without him. He had watched it rise through the thick haze, a burning silhouette against the dark horizon. No message, no explanation, just abandonment, command. "This is Ward. You left me." His voice cracked, dry as the dust filling his lungs. No response came, only the static hum of a dying radio. He laughed once, a hollow sound, and then fell silent. The storm came soon after. Lightning tore through the heavens, striking the shattered towers of the once great city of Lumea. The ground trembled as if the planet itself groaned in pain. Virella was dying. Its core was collapsing, its magnetic field breaking apart. Every few hours the horizon would flicker, reality itself glitching under cosmic strain. Elias dragged himself to his feet, leaning on a broken girder for balance. His reflection in the visor's cracked glass was almost unrecognizable. A man covered in ash and betrayal. He had trusted them. Captain Moraine, Engineer Tessa, Commander Holt, his team, his family, and they had left him here to die. He walked for miles across the desolate plains, guided by instinct and memory. Each step was an act of defiance against despair. The human body was not made for this planet, not anymore, but the human spirit was another matter. In the distance, the remains of an outpost glimmered faintly beneath the dust clouds, Outpost V-19. He remembered its layout, its emergency beacon, its power cells. Hope flickered, faint but alive. Inside, the air was stale and cold. The light sputtered weakly as he forced the door open. He dropped to his knees beside the console and tried to activate the distress beacon. Nothing. Power was gone. He ripped open a panel and began rewiring it manually, hands trembling, but precise. He had been the systems technician once, the one they all relied on when things went wrong. It felt like another lifetime. As he worked, memories clawed at him. Moraine's calm face as she gave the launch order, Tessa avoiding his eyes, Holt muttering something about necessary sacrifices. Necessary, Elias whispered bitterly. Was my life necessary to lose? He slammed his hand against the console. Sparks flew, and for a heartbeat the beacon flickered, then dimmed again. Exhausted, he sank to the floor. Through the cracked window of the outpost, he could see Virella's horizon, a line of molten gold, shifting and trembling as the planet's core destabilized. In a few days, maybe hours, the crust would tear apart. He could give up. No one would blame him, but the human heart has a strange defiance in it, an ancient instinct that refuses surrender. Elias stared at his reflection once more, his face illuminated by the faint red glow of the emergency lights. "They left me," he said slowly, voice cold, steady, "but I am not gone yet." He pulled open a storage hatch and found a power core still humming faintly. A chance. A spark, and sometimes that's all humanity needs. He wired it into the beacon and the room filled with a low hum, a heartbeat returning to a corpse. The distress signal flared weakly, pulsing into the storm. Elias smiled. "Let's see who's out there," he murmured. The wind howled louder outside, slamming against the metal walls as if the planet itself was trying to silence him. But Elias Ward had already made his decision. If the universe had left him to die, he would learn to survive in its silence. And when he returned, he would make them remember. The beacon pulsed like a heartbeat in the dark, weak but alive. Elias sat beside it, staring through the cracked viewport at the storm clawing the horizon. Every few seconds, the lightning illuminated the ruins, silent skeletons of towers and shattered bridges, the bones of a once-living world. He hadn't eaten in 30 hours. The emergency rations in the outpost were sealed in a locker he couldn't access without power. His suit filters were failing. But survival was never just about air or food, it was about purpose. And Elias had found his again. He had sent a signal. Someone would hear, or so he told himself. The next morning, if morning could be called that on a world with no sun, only a blood-colored sky, Elias set about searching the outpost. It had been abandoned for years, perhaps since the first evacuations. He found shattered tablets, corroded tools, and the remains of personal logs half buried in dust. He tapped one of the data pads. It flickered to life just enough to play a single message. To whoever finds this, Virella's core is breaking faster than expected. Evacuation priority goes to command personnel only. If you're reading this, I'm sorry. They knew. They left us. Elias froze. They knew, he whispered. The message had been left by Lieutenant Ren Olin, a name Elias remembered well. Ren had been stationed here before the final survey team arrived. The same survey team that included them, Moraine, Tessa, Holt, and him. Elias clenched his fists. The truth was beginning to take shape, something deliberate. They hadn't just forgotten him. They had chosen to leave him, but why? He found the answer deeper in the outpost. Beneath the storage bay, hidden behind a rusted panel, he discovered a small chamber. Inside were data cores, hundreds of them, each marked with a code he recognized. Terraforming research, core stabilization prototypes, all under Aurora Command's seal. He accessed one of the cores using what little power remained in his suit's auxiliary cells. The projection shimmered to life, blue light against the dust. It showed footage, Captain Moraine's voice, calm, cold. Ward's readings are unstable. If the samples from Virella are correct, exposure to the core field could lead to contamination. We can't risk it. He's already showing symptoms. We leave him behind. Recorded as lost during extraction. Tessa's voice answered, uncertain, trembling. He's not contaminated, Captain. He just needs treatment. We can, Moraine interrupted. We have orders. The recording ended. Elias stood in silence, the hum of the generator faint behind him. His heart felt hollow, an echo of itself. He replayed the recording once, then again, then he shut it off. Contaminated. That was the word they had used. The word that had condemned him, but he wasn't contaminated. He was alive. He had survived the radiation storms, the collapse, the planet itself. Whatever they feared, it wasn't sickness. It was truth. By nightfall, Elias had restored limited power to the outpost. The lights glowed dimly across the control room, shadows dancing along the walls like ghosts of the past. He sat at the console, listening to the hum of the beacon, thinking. He could wait. Maybe a passing freighter would hear his distress call. Maybe a rescue team would come, but something deeper in him whispered otherwise. They would not come for him. He had been written off, erased from their reports, from their conscience. The universe would forget his name, unless he made them remember. He stood and looked at the planet stretching before him through the viewport, cracked plains, glowing fissures and rivers of molten glass, a dying world. And yet, he was still here, still breathing. He whispered to the storm outside as though speaking to an old friend. Then let's begin again, you and I. He scavenged tools, parts, and power cells. He would rebuild the beacon, not to call for rescue but to reach farther, to the relay networks beyond Virella's orbit, to ships, to stations, to those who had betrayed him. If they thought Elias Ward would die quietly, they had forgotten what it meant to be human. By the time the next storm rolled across the plains, Elias had already begun constructing something new, a message carried not in desperation, but in resolve. They had left him to die on a dying planet. But Virella, in its final hours, had given him something in return. Purpose. For 3 days the storm never stopped. It screamed across the plains like a wounded beast, tearing through steel and sand alike. The sky bled red and gray, thunder chasing itself across the horizon. But beneath the chaos, Elias worked. His hands were blistered, his breath shallow, but the beacon was no longer a beacon. It was a weapon. And a voice. He had modified the transmission coils, rewiring the power cores to amplify the signal far beyond standard range. It would reach the orbital lanes, perhaps even the relay satellites drifting forgotten above the planet. It would tell the story they buried, the story of betrayal. And if they heard it, if she heard it, they would know he was still alive. Captain Moraine. The name no longer filled him with sorrow, only purpose. On the fourth day, the signal broke through. The console flickered. A faint reply blinked on the monitor. Broken code, static, then a voice. "This is salvage vessel Kestrel. Identify yourself." "Repeat, identify yourself," Elias froze. His heart thundered in his chest. Someone had heard. He pressed the transmitter. "This is Elias Ward of the Aurora's Promise. I'm stranded on Virella. I need extraction. I repeat, I'm alive." There was a pause, long enough that he thought the storm had swallowed the signal. Then the voice returned. "Elias Ward, you're supposed to be dead." "Not yet," he said quietly. "You have no idea how long we've been hearing that name." The voice continued. "Ward, you're all over the blacklists. Command erased your file." Elias gritted his teeth. "Then maybe it's time they rewrite it." "If that's true, then we can't land. The atmosphere's unstable, but there's a cargo drone still operational near your coordinates. If you can reach it, we'll lock onto its beacon. It's your best chance." Elias's gaze shifted toward the dark horizon, to the storm that seemed to swallow light itself. "How far?" 30 clicks east. Near the Saran Ridge, 30 kilometers. Across terrain that could kill a machine in minutes. He closed his eyes, exhaled slowly, and nodded to no one. "I'll make it. You've got maybe 6 hours before the next surge. Move fast." Then the signal faded, leaving behind the hollow hum of static. Elias didn't hesitate. He gathered what supplies he could. The portable cell, a half-empty oxygen canister, the rusted rifle he'd found near the outpost entrance. It wasn't much, but it was enough. He stepped outside. The storm met him like a living thing, clawing at his visor, screaming in his ears. Each step was a battle. But the human heart, when filled with resolve, is heavier than any gravity. He marched through the dust and wind, guided only by the faint signal pulsing from his wrist. The world around him burned. Rivers of molten stone, clouds that glowed with lightning. He passed the ruins of old domes, broken machines still half buried in ash, their metal skeletons like silent witnesses. And through it all, he thought of them, of Holt's quiet voice, of Tessa's shaking hands, of Moraine's cold eyes. Each name was a step forward. Each memory a spark that kept him moving. He stumbled more than once. His visor cracked further, his oxygen alarm shrieked. He ignored it all. Somewhere above the clouds, the Kestrel was waiting. Maybe it was real. Maybe it wasn't, but hope, even when fragile, was a form of power. At last, he saw it. The cargo drone. A black shape half buried in dust, its lights flickering weakly. He fell to his knees beside it, tearing open the access panel. The systems were barely functional, but the power core still hummed faintly. "Come on," he whispered. "Come on." He linked his suit's transmitter to the drone's beacon. The connection clicked and then stabilized. The air filled with the faint chime of success. "Signal acquired." The Kestrel's voice came faintly through the static. "We've got you, Ward. Hold position. We're moving in." Elias smiled for the first time in weeks. He looked up, through the storm, through the flickering sky, and saw a faint glimmer of light, a ship breaking through the clouds. A promise. He didn't know yet who was aboard, or what awaited him beyond this dying planet. But deep down, he knew one thing. If he was going to leave this world behind, he wouldn't be leaving as the man they abandoned. He would be leaving as something else, something stronger, something reborn in the storm. The descent of the Kestrel was a miracle wrapped in thunder. Through the veil of storm and lightning, the ship broke through the cloud, a dark silhouette against the burning sky. Elias watched as it maneuvered through the debris-filled air, its thrusters fighting gravity's pull. When it finally touched down beside the ridge, the wind roared in protest. He stumbled toward it, every muscle screaming. His oxygen alarms blared. His suit's power flickered out. Then, with a final burst of will, he reached the airlock, a hiss of decompression. A light, white and clean, and spilled across his cracked visor. "Hold him steady," someone shouted. Gloved hands reached out, pulling him inside. He fell to the cold floor as the door sealed shut behind him. The storm's scream was silenced in an instant. For the first time in weeks, Elias was surrounded by stillness. When he woke, it was to the soft hum of ship engines. The ceiling above him was white, lined with flickering maintenance lights. His body ached. His lungs burned, but the air was breathable. He turned his head and saw her. A woman with sharp eyes and a quiet steadiness. Her uniform bore the emblem of Kestrel Salvage. "You're lucky," she said. "Another hour and Varela would have torn itself apart." Elias tried to sit up. "How long was I out?" 8 hours. She handed him a cup of water. "Name's Arden. I'm captain of the ship." He drank slowly, feeling life seep back into him. "Elias Ward," he said quietly. Her expression shifted. Not surprise exactly, but recognition. "So it's true," she murmured. "You really are the one they left behind?" Elias frowned. "You've heard of me?" Arden leaned back. "Everyone's heard of you, the ghost of Varela. Command declared you dead 2 years ago, said you sabotaged your own team. They used your name as a warning to others." He stared at her, unblinking. "They lied, I figured. Why rescue me then? You said I'm blacklisted." Arden's gaze softened. "Because I don't work for them. I work for truth. And you, Elias, you've got a story that's been buried." He followed her through the corridors of the Kestrel. The ship was old but sturdy. Walls scratched and patched, the kind that had seen more survival than glory. The crew nodded as they passed. A handful of engineers, a medic, a pilot, all carried the look of those who had lived on the edge too long. In the comms room, Arden showed him a projection. It was the message he'd broadcast from the outpost, his own voice echoing across space. "They left me to die. If you hear this, tell them Elias Ward remembers." "It's been spreading through the network for weeks," Arden said. "Someone didn't like that. We intercepted an encrypted transmission. Command issued a recall order for any vessel that made contact with you." Elias stared at the glowing map of star systems. "They're trying to erase me again. Seems that way." He looked down, fist tightening. "Then they know I'm alive." Arden hesitated. "There's more." She tapped the console. Another projection flickered, grainy footage but unmistakable. The Aurora's promise. His old ship, Captain Moraine standing at the helm. Confirmed transmission. "If Ward's alive, terminate and contain." No witnesses. The image froze. Elias said nothing. His reflection in the screen was calm, unreadable. But his eyes were not. They burned. So this was what survival meant. To live long enough to see your betrayers call your life an inconvenience. He took a slow breath. "How long until we can leave orbit?" 6 hours once the storm clears. Why?" "Because I'm going to them," Arden frowned. "You're not thinking straight. You've barely recovered." Elias turned to her. "They left me to die, Captain. Now they're sending death to silence me. There's no running from that. There's only one direction left. Toward them," she said quietly. He nodded. "Exactly." Arden studied him for a long moment, then finally sighed. "You really are human through and through. Stubborn, reckless, impossible to kill." Elias smiled faintly. "That's what makes us human, isn't it?" The captain gave a small nod. "Then let's make them remember what that means." Outside, the storm broke for the first time in weeks, revealing the dying light of a planet giving its last breath. And aboard the Kestrel, a man who had been left behind began planning the return no one expected. The engines of the Kestrel roared to life, cutting through the void like a blade. Elias stood on the bridge, hands gripping the railing, watching the stars streak past as the ship left Varela behind. Below, the planet's surface glowed with molten veins, a final reminder of everything he had survived. He was alive. Against every calculation, every betrayal, every death sentence he had survived, and now? They would know it. Arden moved beside him, calm as ever. Course plotted through the comet belt, fewer patrols there. "Command won't know we're coming until we're too close to stop it." Elias nodded. "I don't need subtlety. I need them to remember." "You mean revenge," she corrected, eyes sharp. He didn't answer. He looked at the stars. To the humans who had abandoned him, the faces of betrayal were etched deep. Captain Moraine's calm dismissal. Tessa's frightened silence. Holt's quiet complicity. He had been left to die on a world no one cared to save. Now he would return as something no one expected. A reckoning. The journey was tense. Every signal ping, every passing ship sent his pulse racing. The crew of the Kestrel kept him informed, cautious. But Elias didn't need caution. He needed momentum, a way to strike the first chord that would echo through their memories. He spent hours in the comms room, digging through command records, surveillance archives, and encrypted logs. Every file he could access painted the same picture: cover-ups, falsified reports, and lies. Their excuses had been thin veils over betrayal. It made him sick, and it made him unstoppable. On the third day of travel, the Kestrel entered the outer fringe of command territory. Sensor arrays lit up with activity. Patrol drones, reconnaissance satellites, automated defenses. Elias didn't flinch. "Plot a course toward Aurora Station," he said. "Moraine will be there. She'll be expecting me to be gone forever. Let's prove her wrong." Arden hesitated. "It's risky. You know what they'll do if they find us." He turned to her, his face a mask of cold certainty. "I'm not afraid of them. I was left for dead. I've survived what they couldn't even imagine. If fear still has a hold on me, then it won't be fear, it will be justice." Her eyes softened. "Then let's make it count." The approach to Aurora Station was like entering a lion's den. Automated turrets tracked the Kestrel, drones zipped along patrol routes, and communications relayed false alerts of hostile, unknown vessel. Elias watched all of it, every detail, and he smiled. They thought he was gone. They thought he would never return. They were wrong. The Kestrel slipped through the shadows of the station's exterior. Elias coordinated with Arden and the pilot, timing movements to avoid detection while still keeping momentum. Every calculated risk felt like breathing. Every maneuver was a silent promise. They would pay attention to him now. Finally, they docked. The station's airlock sealed with a hiss, and the Kestrel became a ghost inside the heart of their enemy. Elias stepped out first. His boots echoed across the empty corridors, a rhythm of inevitability. Sensors flickered as if recognizing something anomalous. And then he saw her, Captain Moraine. She hadn't expected this. He could see it in her eyes. A flicker of recognition, of calculation, of the shock of seeing what should have been dead alive. Elias's voice was steady, controlled. "You left me to die, Captain. Do you remember me now?" Her jaw tightened. "Elias Ward. You shouldn't be here, shouldn't I?" He stepped closer, letting the weight of weeks of survival and fury settle into his presence. "I survived the storms, the collapse, the silence, and now I've come back." The air between them thickened, electric with tension, with betrayal. Every choice, every lie they had spun was about to confront the truth, and truth, Elias knew, was merciless. He looked around at the empty station, at the automated systems lying dormant because no one had cared to maintain them properly. They had built their empire on fear, convenience, and abandonment. He would rebuild the story of what happened. Every lie, every betrayal, every face that had turned away, all would be remembered. And he would make sure that humanity itself, the spirit that refused to die on Virella, was seen in every act of his return. The storm of revenge was coming, and no one would escape its force. The corridors of Aurora Station were silent, but silence carried a weight far heavier than noise. Elias Ward moved through the metallic halls like a shadow, every step measured, every breath contained. His eyes, once hollow from betrayal, now burned with the fire of purpose. He was no longer the man left for dead on Virella. He was judgment incarnate, a force the command had ignored at their peril. Ahead, the station's central hub glowed faintly, humming with the power of a bureaucracy that believed itself untouchable. And in its heart stood Moraine. Elias paused outside the door, his reflection flickering in the polished metal. She had commanded him, betrayed him, left him to die on a planet that had become his tomb, and now he had returned, not for mercy but for justice. He drew a slow breath, letting the storm within him settle into cold, deliberate focus. Every step forward was a reminder. Humanity does not break easily. Inside the hub, Captain Moraine turned as he entered. Her eyes widened for a heartbeat. Recognition, calculation, panic. "Ward," she said, voice steady, but the calm had cracks. "You shouldn't have returned." "I wasn't supposed to," he replied, voice low and sharp. "But here I am, alive, watching you pretend to lead while abandoning the people who trusted you." Moraine's lips pressed together. "You think you can—" "I don't think," Elias interrupted. "I act. You left me to die on a planet crumbling under its own core. You thought I was expendable. You thought my life was just another line in a report. You were wrong." He let the words hang, each syllable a weight pressing against the air. Behind him, the systems of Aurora Station began to flicker. He had spent hours studying their network, exploiting every vulnerability, planting every signal, every trap. Lights dimmed. Communications cut off. Drones powered down. The empire that had dismissed him faltered under his hands, not with violence, but with the inevitability of truth. What have you done? Moraine asked, voice trembling. I've reminded the station who controls reality here, he said, not by fear, not by death, but by exposing everything you tried to hide. He tapped the console. Screens flickered to life, displaying logs, transmissions, recordings of Command's decisions, the lies, the betrayals, the abandoned lives. Tessa, Holt, Moraine herself, their excuses for leaving him on Virella laid bare. You left me to die, Elias said, voice soft now, almost a whisper, and the universe tried to erase me. But humanity survives. We survive, and I survived it all. Moraine's face paled. Her calm composure had vanished. You can't, this will ruin everything. Everything needs to be remembered, he replied. Not for me. For every life that was treated as disposable. For every human who ever fought against impossible odds. He stepped closer, each movement deliberate. Moraine tried to meet his gaze, but she faltered. He had no anger left, only certainty. I came back merciless, he said, not to kill you, but to make sure the world knows, to make sure no one can pretend this never happened. He activated the final sequence. The station would automatically transmit all the exposed records to the outer colonies, the relays, the freighters, and every listening post. The universe would see in full clarity what betrayal truly looked like. Moraine sank to a chair, trembling. Ward, what will you do now? Elias looked at her, the fires of his survival reflecting in his eyes. Now, I leave you to face the truth. He turned, walking out of the hub, leaving her to the consequences of her own choices. No hatred, no unnecessary violence. Just the merciless justice of exposure, of remembrance, of survival. Outside the station, the void stretched endlessly. Elias stood on the observation deck, looking toward the distant stars. Humanity had abandoned him once, but now, the universe knew his name, and the truth he carried was far stronger than any lie. He whispered to himself, the wind of space brushing against the station's hull. They left me to die, but I came back merciless, not for revenge, not for power, but for what it means to be human, and no one can ever take that away. The stars twinkled beyond the black expanse, and for the first time in years, Elias felt an unshakable calm. The storm within him had settled. The fire of betrayal had forged him into something unbreakable. Somewhere far away the universe was listening. And humanity's spirit, indomitable, resilient, unyielding, had never been more alive. Elias Ward floated in the observation deck of the Kestrel, the void of space stretching endlessly before him. Aurora Station had become a monument, not to power, not to command, but to truth. Moraine and her crew would live with the consequences of their choices. But he no longer sought vengeance. That chapter had closed. The stars beyond the viewport were alive, glittering with possibilities. Humanity's colonies, scattered across light years, were listening now. Every log, every confession, every hidden truth from Aurora Station had been broadcast across the relay networks. He had survived the impossible. He had returned from death on a planet that no one cared to save. And the universe had taken notice. Arden approached quietly, placing a hand on his shoulder. You've done it, Elias. They can't hide it anymore. He looked at her, exhausted but resolute. It's not about them anymore. It's about what comes next. What comes next? She asked. He smiled faintly. Humans, surviving, remembering, learning. If we can endure Virella, if we can survive the betrayals that nearly killed us, then there's nothing we can't face. Not planets collapsing, not corrupt commands, not abandonment, nothing. Arden nodded. You're different now? I had to be, he admitted. Virella broke me. Command tried to erase me. But they underestimated something eternal in humanity. The will to survive and the will to rise. The Kestrel left the remnants of Aurora Station behind, a beacon of truth now floating silently in the void. Elias didn't look back. He plotted a course toward the outer colonies, settlements forgotten by bureaucracy, worlds abandoned by command, planets where hope had flickered and nearly died. He would carry the message with him. Survival was not just a fight against the physical world, but a testament to human spirit. For weeks, the crew traveled in silence, rebuilding, repairing, sharing stories and sharing meals. Elias, once alone on a dying planet, now led a crew that had chosen him not out of orders but out of belief in his cause. They spoke of Virella often, not with sorrow, but with reverence, the dying planet that had forged him, shaped him, and reminded them all of the strength humanity could find in the face of certain death. One night, Elias stood at the observation deck, looking at a cluster of twin suns rising over a distant world. The light danced across the hull, reflecting off his visor. He thought of the past, Moraine's betrayal, Holt's silence, Tessa's fear. He felt no hatred now, and only clarity. They left me to die, he whispered softly to the stars, but I came back merciless. And I remembered what it means to live. A soft chime from the comms panel drew his attention. Reports from colonies, freighters, and research stations flooded in. Confirmation of Aurora Station's revelations, acknowledgement of his survival, and gratitude from those who had once been voiceless under command's rule. He allowed himself a small, genuine smile. Humanity had survived, and in surviving it had reclaimed dignity. Weeks later, the Kestrel arrived at a lush, thriving planet untouched by war or corruption. Elias disembarked with Arden and the crew, feeling the grass beneath his boots for the first time in months. He breathed in the scent of life, raw, unfiltered, vibrant. This is it, Arden said softly. A chance to rebuild, to start fresh. Elias nodded. He knelt, running his hands through the soil. Virella was a lesson. Survival isn't just about enduring, it's about remembering, about rising stronger, no matter how cruel the universe becomes. They walked toward the settlement, toward people who had never known fear or abandonment, toward lives they could help shape. Elias's heart, once hardened by betrayal, now carried hope, not just for himself, but for every human who would listen, who would remember, who would fight to endure. And as the twin suns rose higher in the sky, Elias Ward finally understood. Survival was not vengeance. Survival was the ultimate triumph of spirit, resilience, and humanity itself. He had been left for dead. He had come back merciless, and now he would help humanity rise among the stars.